I don't know the full context around this. Scott Reames has a great LinkedIn post, but as best as we can tell, Ben, as you said, the company was growing hugely. There are all these new employees there who are just kind of taken for granted that Nike is winning. Strasser gets kind of pissed off one day, and he goes to his typewriter, and he fires off a memo. He copies this memo, and pastes it up on the walls all around the office of Nike. 10 principles.
Every single individual has a story to tell, and they're great stories that need to be heard.
I want every listener to know they have the ability to change the world.
Welcome to the 1720 Podcast.
What's up, Mound Movers? Welcome back to the 1720 Podcast. I'm in a weird season here. So 4 days out until I go on a cruise. But this airs after the cruise is already over. So magical cruise. The family had a ton of fun.
Oh,
Sunshine, sunburn, read a book.
So exciting.
Like, do I just make up how it went?
Yeah, tell us where you went, past tense.
Oh, so it was a wonderful trip. Long line to get onto the cruise ship. The meals were meh. We flew out of Orlando and stayed a night in Port Canaveral, and then we left for the Bahamas. Nassau was one of them, and I forget, it's called like Perfect Bay or something. So Royal Caribbean, did you know they own an island?
I did know that. Don't know how, but I did know that, yes.
Yeah, so it's kind of kid-friendly. There's a water park there.
Yeah.
So we're signed up for that. We did the water park, I mean.
Oh, I heard it was great, and you guys had a blast.
Yeah, I went down the slide. It was, all the things. But the cool thing is, at Quinn's children camp this summer, there's two huge milestones I would have liked to get through this summer. One is learning how to swim, and two is taking the training wheels off the bike. Two, ain't happening. We haven't rode the bike in a month. It's just not practical between 5 and 7 to ride around the subdivision when it's 178 degrees. But fact. The dogs haven't seen the outdoors either.
No.
But swimming, so there's a shallow end test and a deep end test, and she just passed deep end yesterday. So it's like perfect timing to, let her have fun and swim and not have to wear the floaties all the time type of thing.
Yeah.
And like lower the amount of stress, because water and kiddos, man, that's a stressful thing, and head on a swivel type scenario.
Yeah. You want my every time instant it. You want my hot tip on teaching a kid to ride a bicycle? I got one.
Just shove them down the driveway.
No, that's not the tip. Oh. The tip is you're going to take the bike and lower the seat as far down as it'll go. All the way, just crank it all the way down where it's uncomfortably low. Then you're going to get 2 crescent wrenches and you're going to take the pedals off the bike.
Oh, do a balance bike season?
And you turn it into a balance bike, yeah. And what will happen is, at least in my experience, and this is a tip from an old law partner of mine, Mike Nixon. Shout out to Mike Nixon. I was wrestling with this a decade ago, more than that, trying to get, and he sent me to this link. I think it was on the REI website that basically walked through this process of drop the seat, pull the wheels off, and then just balance bike them for weeks, and then tell them like that once you can balance bike it, you'll put the wheels back on, or the pedals back on. And for all 3 kids, boom, it was magic.
That's what you did?
Yeah, that's what I did for all 3 kids. They all took to it almost immediately. Mike was a genius. Ari, I knew how to do it. It was awesome.
That's a hot tip.
That is a hot parenting tip for free right there, for free.
What did you... Oh, man, we are way in the ditch.
Here, I'll swing us into a little content for days. There once upon a time was a company called Nike. And it has been conversationally, at least in my circles, a lot of talk lately because of the Air movie that came out. So I don't know if you guys have watched it or not. I watched it with the boys a few weeks ago. It was a great movie, especially if you love sneakers and basketball and stuff like this. And it's got Ben Affleck and I forgot his name, Matt Damon in it, and a few other like famous folks. So it's a really good, really well done movie.
Yeah, it's an underdog story, man.
It really is.
Zero market share initially. It was awesome.
It was awesome. And so I watched it maybe 3 weeks ago. About 2 weeks ago, I was mowing the yard or fiddling the yard or something like this, and opened up Spotify to just turn me on to some new podcast that I hadn't listened to before, and ended up on this podcast called Acquired. Have you and I talked about this yet, Kev?
Nope.
Yeah, so it's called the Acquired. It's two guys basically who take months and months and months and months reading books and every piece of information that they can find about a company, and then they long form tell the company story. And so in this is like 2 weeks ago now. It was, when I opened it up, it was about Porsche, and they told the story from, Mr. Original OG Porsche, who he was, how he got in the business, ups and downs, back and forth. By the way, he was a raging Nazi. Their interface with VW. I listened to it for over 4 hours. It was so good. And so I thought, man, this is a really great podcast. I can't wait for the next one to come out. And drumroll, please, on Monday, I guess now it's a few weeks ago, but the following Monday, they released their Nike episode.
Oh, I thought it was going to be about quarter zips.
No, the history and legacy of quarter zip. But, well, I know that's not the case because they didn't interview me about it. But in any event, these guys said they read like 80 books, watched everything Phil Knight had ever said, talked to people who were like the de facto employed by Nike historians to get the story of Nike put together. And it was amazing. Like, I commend that podcast and the listening. If you're into that sort of thing, it's fantastic. But, and I'll link to the specific spot in the episode in the show notes, but there's a spot where they hit the Air, right? They hit the story of Air that you saw, and they basically said everything in the movie was wrong. Everything that they talked about was wrong. I mean, the people were the right people, but this guy actually didn't do that, and this guy actually didn't do that, and this is how it went, and that's not really who that person is, and explained why they thought it was all different. But it kind of brings it to this Nike principles document that we're going to talk about today. And so if you've seen the movie, it's hanging in long, huge form on Phil Knight's wall as if it was something that Nike had really intended to form the basis of who they were. And in reality, Phil Knight didn't come up with it. It was a lawyer who had joined Nike who was frustrated one day and sat down and sort of mashed out this principles document. But it's floated around the internet in different incantations as to who wrote it, when it was written, how it was done, etc. But this Nike principles document has had a lot of airtime in the last few months. So I wanted to walk through it and just see what was he talking about. Is it good? Is it bad? Did it last? Is it something that we should be leaning into, leaning out of, etc.? So that's kind of the foundation or the setup for our conversation today. I'm assuming you've looked over it, yeah?
Yeah. So what do we do? Do we just announce each one by one and then do a 2-minute drill on each?
Yeah, I think that's the thing. I mean, some of them probably get a 30-second drill and some of them probably get longer, but I think that would be the plan. So I'll link, actually this Nike Principles document, we might put this as the episode cover, but I'll link to it so you guys can follow along and read it or reflect on it on your own, but I'll read them here just to set the stage, right? So the first one is, number one, our business is change. And so when you think about Nike in the 70s, 80s, I mean, they were trying to do something unique. But I think this is the reflection point is this, if you're putting words on the wall, is this one you want? Our business is change. Thoughts, Kev?
I don't know about, when I think of principles, it's almost like core values. I don't know if I would include it as a core value, but I think it's something to definitely follow and lean into, because adapting and innovation are huge in any business. And I've been bitten by that bug with how disciplined I am in routine. When I try to change that routine, it's very difficult for me. And so we can bash the old heads and make fun of them for saying, well, this is the way we've always done it, and complain about that. But like, when you look in the mirror, there's a level of you saying that as well, like in some form or fashion. Like, well, this routine works. Why would I change this? I'll give you just a small example. So my routine the night before going to bed is laying out all my supplements for the next day. And I manually take all, like, the fish oil, the vitamins, the probiotics, and I take them all on the bottles and I balance it on top of my protein cup. Sadie bought me like a spin wheel for 7 days of the week.
Oh yeah.
And she's like, drop your pills in there. And I'm like, well, I don't want to. She's like, and then we start arguing about time. And then looked in the mirror and I'm like, you're right. I only have to touch these pill bottles once a week and I dump all 7 days in there every Wednesday.
Right.
You actually just did save me some time. And now I just got to grab that bottle. And so like when you're just hammered down on the routine, this works, this is effective, even if it's innovative and efficient, I think it's just human nature to put up some resistance. So it's a good reminder that change is always welcome, always coming, best idea wins type mentality.
Yeah, and if so this document, at least as Laura would have it, circulated in 1977. Nike is trying to change things then, but really at the time leaning into, their expertise is running shoes. It's only a few years later that the story that's depicted in Air, and as we all know to be like Michael Jordan, rebuffing Converse and rebuffing Adidas to come to Nike constitutes change that is unprecedented in the market, right? And I won't belabor it all here, but the idea that their business being changed and that principle that was on the document gave rise to the idea that they could or maybe had to do it different then. And when they did it different then, they were ready to listen for the difference. They were ready to do it different. And when they did it differently, or stated differently, when they did change, it literally changed everything in that space they're in. So having a mindset of being prepped for it so that you can avail yourself to it when it shows up, I think that's really the key takeaway for me is you don't always want to change. You don't always want to be doing it differently, but you need to be ready for it. You need to be prepared to do it differently because it could literally change everything.
Totally, man.
Yeah. So the next one you're going to love. Like, we don't even need to talk about it more than a second. And we're just going to go straight to number 3. Number 2 is we're on offense all the time. And this is straight down the Kevin Carey playbook fairway. Be on offense.
Yeah. It doesn't resonate with me at all.
Flat line on that. Don't agree with it. Can't.
That's right. Yeah. It's literally a chapter in the book. So, yes, it's the life I live. And the one thing I'll say is when that pendulum's pinned in reactive mode, while you're putting those fires out, you have to add proactive measures. And it's going to be more work before it's less in that season. But if you don't do that, while you're putting out the fires right in front of your face, new fires are stoking that you cannot see yet. Yeah. And that's why you feel like you forever go from fire to fire. So you have to grind down, especially when that pendulum swings to reactive, to get it back down a couple notches. And not expect a wild swing, but over time you will look back and be like, oh, wow, we did it. All right, we're being more proactive.
Yeah, agree with that. I think in the context of the Nike story, we're on offense all the time. I think it speaks to or harkens maybe in this idea of being hyper aggressive, right? And so there's an intermediation between the idea of being on offense, like not being reflective or reactive to issues and getting ahead of them and working on them proactively. The idea of being on offense means being proactive. And I think perhaps here in what Nike's saying is we're on offense all the time just means like taking the fight to the enemy, being aggressive with that idea. I don't think either one of them are necessarily a bad thing. I mean, obviously the approach, the tone, the tenor, the modality, all of that is important, but taking the fight to the enemy, I think probably something that you would say yes to that too. Not just be proactive, but taking the fight to the enemy in terms of your business challenges, your personal challenges, your struggles, whatever. You have to be aggressive in attacking it too. Not just have a plan for doing it, but being aggressive in the execution of it as well.
Totally.
Yeah. All right. We don't need to talk about that anymore. Go read the book. Number 3, perfect results count, not a perfect process. Break the rules, fight the law. Go.
So my first thought was, break the rules, fight the law. Stewie's not going to like that sub-bullet.
Oh.
But the perfect results count, not a perfect process. It reminds me of paralysis by analysis. Yeah. So if you have a perfect plan, but you don't take any action on it, it's worthless. You're better off coming up with a good enough plan. So the Craig Groeschel Gitmo, good enough to move on acronym. Like you come up with something, start taking steps forward, fall forward, as you said in the very first episode, and then work on improving it over time. Learn from your mistakes. Where did we screw up? Tying back to number 1, our business is change. Like you adapt over time, but you can't just sit there and think about it forever. You got to take action.
Yeah, I actually don't disagree with this, ironically. I will tell you, it's one of my spaces that I wrestle with most, because my bent is I want to derive a perfect process, because if I can derive or implement a perfect process, then we will get a perfect result. And so sometimes I get hung up there. You know this. I have paralysis by analysis really bad. It's just one of my life problems, right? Like, but that's not to say that I'm not aware of this and I don't agree with this. And you would think that like break the rules, fight the law, part of that I would disagree with. And actually, Ashley would tell you let's go this way. Ashley would tell you that I hate rules. I hate being told what to do. I hate the idea that someone else thought about it and knew better and is going to impose that on me. And so I do have deeply down inside of me this sort of fight everybody mentality. So it doesn't offend me. The break the rules, fight the law doesn't offend me. It goes again to one with respect to breaking the rules and being a business of change. And it goes, and I don't know that law in this context, and again, I'm not Rob Strasser and I don't know what he meant, but fight the law here, I don't know that it necessarily meant fight the institution of law as much as it meant fight the gravity of the law, like of what the principles of just how things get done. From my perspective, 3 and 1 connect together pretty well in terms of being a business of change and breaking the rules.
Yep, I agree.
Yep. Okay. Did you see Air, by the way?
Oh yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
And there's only been a few movies that I've seen, probably that and Lone Survivor, where I knew the outcome, but I was still on the edge of my seat, if that makes sense. So I read Lone Survivor before watching the movie. It was still intense. And then same with this. I obviously know the outcome of Air, but still edge of my seat. I was getting pumped. I think I love underdog stories.
You love underdog stories and you love Michael Jordan. So it's like a double for you there.
Yeah. And that pooch behind me chewed my Retro 3 shoelaces and ate the tags off the tongue this week. So a little side note for you.
I've LOL'd at the idea that she chews up your, right? Yeah. Chews up your, what?
Nothing.
Okay. Chews up your journals and stuff like this. But hitting the AJs, she's going to have to go, man.
Yeah.
It's just the end of it.
Just going to open the front door.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
See you
later. She will run.
It's kind of hot, though. I don't know. She might be like, not today. Yeah. Okay. Number 4. This is as much about battle as it is about business. Thoughts?
Yeah, this one was where I was like, I might need some more discernment. Like, depends on the battle. Like, who are you battling? Are you battling for a purpose? Are you battling competition? Are you battling each other? Like, some of those are good and healthy. Other of those are debatable whether they're good or healthy. So, like, identifying what is the battle, who are we battling, in that context would be good. Yeah.
Not perfect. Like I said, this is early. This is something that I think he hammered out like in an afternoon just out of frustration that ended up lore. I don't know what he would say if he was sitting here about whether or not it needed to be refined, but I don't think that Strasser in this moment thought it was a battle for battle's sake. I think this was a battle for the domination of competition's sake. I mean, at the end of the day, all these guys who worked at Nike up until the mid 70s were competitors. Phil Knight and Bowerman were hiring people primarily who had run for the Oregon track program under Bowerman, who were coming into the Nike program and working for Nike. They were all competitors. They were all just voraciously focused on winning. And I think that mentality took over at Nike. Still to this day, they're focused on winning.
Yeah.
And what that means for them is winning, i.e. taking market share from other shoe manufacturers, things of this nature. That's, I think, the battle that they had at hand was, we started a business to win. It is a battle. As much as it is about numbers, it's about taking market share, putting them out of business, pulling their customers, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, I feel like that was 10 years ago, Kevin, when I lacked a purpose and super hyper focused on what the competition is doing, dogging the competition, all that sort of stuff. Now I don't even pay attention to them. The grabbing market share is a byproduct of having a shared vision, a shared purpose that we live out every single day. So that's a battle worth fighting for to me.
Yeah. It's and I think probably, well, I can't say that at all, actually. I was going to say Nike may have refined that over time, but I'm not sure, man. They are aggressive in trying to just smush everybody. And Doing
To
a
each
really
their
good
own.
job.
They're killing it. So
They're killing it. They're making tons of money. Okay, number 5. I kind of like this one. Assume nothing. I don't know how these all ended up in the same number. It feels like you probably should have put some extra bullets here. Assume nothing. Make sure people keep their promises. Push yourself, push others, and stretch the possible. I don't know that I disagree with much of that, but your thoughts?
yeah, I mean, when you root cause analysis, any sort of incident, injury, mistake made, it almost always boils down to an assumption made. I assumed one hand was doing the other. I assumed she was running with this, not me. I mean, name it. And so zero assumptions been something that's been integral to business for me for at least the past 5 years.
And I'll tell you, one of the biggest mistakes, I think so. One of the biggest mistakes I made as a private practitioner was based upon an assumption. And it was actually this thing happened. There were 2 people. I assumed the other person was doing it. The other person assumed I was doing it. It didn't get done. And everything was fine. But it was like in that moment, we looked at each other and that was when I thought, no, we have to over communicate because assumptions are terrible. And I'll tell you this, we were in the conference room the other day working on brainstorming a big issue. And one of the first things I wrote on the board is, what are we assuming?
Yeah.
Because we have to from my perspective, it's super dangerous. That assumption modality is super dangerous.
Yeah. Clear communication is huge in that. Like if you have somebody that direct reports to you and they made a mistake, that's a great opportunity to look in the mirror and immediately extreme ownership style and say, how well did I communicate the plan? Because that person was assuming, is it insubordination, incompetence, or did they not have a playbook to play from?
Right. Yeah. Well, this kind of goes to the next one. Make sure people keep their promises, right? You can have your extreme ownership of that particular hypothetical issue, but if you ask someone to do something and it didn't get done, well, there has to be some level of accountability. I think that this goes internal and external, but making sure people keep their promises and from a words on the wall sort of perspective, commonly people will put up there like, do what we say and things of this nature. It's not that, this one's not that far out in left field.
Totally.
Push yourselves, push others, and stress the possible.
I just kind of lumped all these together and focused on assumption when digesting it.
Well, and with respect to those last 2 ideas, I mean, I don't know that I disagree with those. We need to figure out where people can grow, push them into their growing spaces, and stress what, as leaders, I can look at what's going on and convince or encourage or maybe push people to stretch themselves beyond what they thought was possible. And so I don't disagree with any of that.
No.
6 is weird. I think you have to understand who Nike was and what they were doing and where they were at the time. But number 6 is live off the land. And I got nothing on that other than that's weird.
Yeah. I mean, my interpretation of that is maybe be nimble with what you're doing and then being lean. So like especially in a startup mode, like you can't be flashing cash everywhere. You got to be very intentional with investments. And if you even think about that movie Air, like how painful it was to come up with the scratch to present to Michael Jordan, like that was a mountain to climb.
Yeah.
And I think Matt Damon's argument there is like, if we disperse this 250 or whatever that sum was to 7 different people, we're going to get nowhere. Let's put all our eggs in this basket. And that was a very risky deal, but it was being lean with the sum of money that they had. They didn't stretch over that amount. They went all in on that one amount.
Yeah.
And so being lean with your processes, being efficient, hiring and promoting from within, like that's the only thing I could come up with when reflecting on that one.
Yeah, I was sort of dismissive of it. Those are good ideas. Maybe that's what it meant. The best I could come up with in terms of a riff on live off the land was that there were a bunch of runners who were living in the Pacific Northwest in Oregon at the time. And I just thought, like, is this an homage to the roots of Nike at the time where they were all sort of granola homies? And this was like the idea that they were going to be, one with nature or something like this. But live off the land, if you wanted to parlay it into like being lean, living on what you have, not extending yourself beyond your means and stuff like that. I mean, irrespective of what Nike meant at the time, that's a great principle to live on. So I'll take that. I'll take that as an acceptable riff on that one.
Yeah.
Yeah. Man, number 7 is actually sort of a cross riff on one of my 12 points from the other day, but it's your job isn't done until the job is done. And I think that might have been 12. The idea I said was sending an email doesn't constitute doing your job, right? You didn't do anything. You just did a part of the process and try to convince me that it was done. Again, your job isn't done until the job is done. I don't know that that's necessarily like a controversial idea or anything.
No, but it's a huge problem in construction. So I'll start looking in the mirror in the field. When we say walk away from a opening finished, that means finished. Like, just because the glass is in the hole doesn't mean that opening's finished. It needs pressure bar, it needs face cap, it needs 2 lines of silicone. Like, it's not done until it's finished. So don't mark it off a sheet until it's finished. And then sequencing with general contractors, I can't even tell you how many times we get a call that you're ready, our part's done, it's your turn, and we show up and there's just a hole punched into the wall and there's no flashing, waterproofing, like you're weeks away from it being ready. Mm-hmm. And I know people face that with needing to do work inside the building, but they can't do the work before the HVAC's on and tested and balanced, or maybe not tested and balanced, but at least controlled environment. But right. People are saying our job's done, it's your job, and then we spin our wheels, spend costs to mobilize people, and it's not actually ready. And that's why, to a few weeks ago with Steve, like that communication with OAC, like, let's identify what done is. Done equals X, Y, and Z. And so ownership, rather than complain about it, serve that up to the contractor months before you mobilize and say, hey, because you think about it, there's always a project engineer on every job, right? That's most likely a rookie. They don't know what they don't know. So when they see a hole open, they might just say, oh, okay, you're ready for it. Tee them up proactively and play offense and say, hey, not only do we need that opening ready for our framing or the building to be controlled environment, but we need X, Y, and Z. These are our activators. And then we can come do the work.
Right. And it helps. So it goes back to 2 other points. It goes to play offense, number 2, from the Nike principles. It goes to number 5, also, like, assume nothing. Because when they say, hey, it's ready, when they say, hey, it's ready, whatever that is, and then you just use that information to rely on and mobilize, you've assumed that guy knew what ready was. And that when you show up, it's actually going to be up to your standards in terms of what it's going to take for you to perform your work or execute your work on top of it. So you've made an assumption in that process too, that you, from your perspective, you're playing offense and mitigating the assumption by saying, hey, I can only do my work if X. Can you confirm those things are completed?
Yeah, and then you don't have any money because you went over budget and you got to live off the land.
Oh, triple threat. How about that? Triple threat. Your job isn't done until the job's done. I like that one. Okay, number 8. This one's a big panoply of stuff, but it's just dangers.
Come again?
It's a panoply. It's a collection of things that aren't necessarily related.
Yeah, for Fisher. Thank you.
Yeah, bureaucracy, personal ambition, energy takers versus energy givers, knowing our weaknesses, and don't get too many things on the platter. Those are all dangers that Strasser identifies in plus or minus 1977 for Nike. Those are all pretty good ones. Those are all pretty good things just corporately for you to be aware of. Bureaucracy, ambition, takers versus givers, knowing your weaknesses, and saying, protecting your no, right? Like, that's basically what he says. And I think those are all, except for maybe the bureaucracy point, those are all things that we've talked about on here. Any of them jump out to you?
Well, I didn't understand why knowing our weaknesses was in that subcategory.
Yeah,
I feel like that's a strength.
You probably framed that one wrong, right? Like maybe it's a danger if you don't know your weaknesses.
It's got to be, because knowing your weaknesses is a superpower, man.
Correct.
And admitting them and offsetting them, or finding people that offset it, or building them to strengths. I mean, that's all successes. But bureaucracy, that's a tough one for ladder climbers. When they get stuck in a mega company that has a bunch of checks and balances, and you got to go 15 years before you get that next stage. Like, that's why they don't stay at those companies, because they got to cut through that red tape that they're not patient enough to cut through.
Yeah. Well, and bureaucracy is, I think way early on, it might have been Preston Presley that, and during his episode, we were talking about how the industry feels like it feels like the industry is or needs to change around the idea that you have to have 15 years of experience. It's either because that 15 years might be the same year 15 times over, and making an assessment of who the right person is for the right job might mean skipping a step or not following some bureaucratic check or balance or something like this. And so I get that it is dangerous. And I get that. I also, to the other side of that, right, I understand why large companies have bureaucracy. It goes back to a processes idea from earlier. Like, and there's 7,000 people here. We need some way to do it. That way we're all doing it the same way. And there's, so I go back and forth on that, but I do appreciate that it is a danger, right? The getting trapped in it, getting trapped in the bureaucracy lends itself to this is just the way we do it, and forgetting that we need to be nimble and live off the land and be a business of change and all that stuff. So I see how those all go together.
Yeah, and I can't elaborate any further because I said that word right the first time, and I don't want to go for it a second time.
Which one? Bureaucracy?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, I'll say it. Yeah, all these other things, I mean, it doesn't surprise me that they're on here. Ambition, energy taking versus energy giving, and getting too many things on your platter. A couple of those, specifically that last one, kind of speaks directly to me. Number 9, but these last two I absolutely love. Number 9, it won't be pretty. Duh, right?
Yeah, I think that was, well, I'm again getting caught in the timetable conundrum here, but this past Sunday's church service, man, that was, Craig Rochelle was hammering that point. And it was at the movie series, and it was about the movie, I don't remember the name of it, but it was this Australian sailor, young lady that took on this monumental voyage across the sea and in her little pink sailboat. And
oh yeah, I saw that.
Dude, it's an awesome movie. And like, she faced opposition, right? Like you might be onto something when you face opposition. Just because you face opposition doesn't mean you should fold it up. You should listen to it and see if there's some truth in the middle, but you shouldn't necessarily shut it down. But then adversity's coming. Like, you're going to make mistakes. You're going to face, in her instance, literal terrible storms that converged on each other, and she sank underwater and underwater, and the boat was watertight, and like it's an amazing movie and story. I know you're Googling it to give it a shout out, but
I did.
Yes, it won't be pretty. Like, you have to expect that. Again, that's in my eyes, playing offense, because you, just like you say, what are our assumptions? Right next to assumptions on a whiteboard, you could write what ifs. What are our what ifs in this scenario? What if this person falls? What if this person doesn't show up? If this person quits? If this, like, there's a million what ifs you can, as you say, riff on.
Yeah. Contingency planning, right? And the what if statements is like a high level contingency planning. I think it's called True Spirit. Is that right?
Sounds about right.
It's about this lady named Jessica Watson, who was the youngest person to circumnavigate the globe nonstop unassisted. Is that right?
Yeah, an Australian based.
Yeah. It's a brand new movie too, by the way. 2023 biographical drama. And Ashley was actually watching it the other day. I came home and sat down, and it was on TV, and I sat down and watched it for a minute. One of the few moments that I saw of it was actually the scene where I guess the boat capsized or something, and she was underwater for a minute, and it ended up popping back up. I forget exactly how it happened. But.
Yeah, it went deep. Like, it was sinking.
Yeah.
And she hit the emergency button, and that's when, the dust storm in the church started. It's a bummer because of copywriting. That whole series isn't shareable because we've just finished a 4-week at the movie series, which is a good evangelical thing to bring people in. Provided that powerful moment of that daily motivation a couple weeks ago from Paul's buddy raising his hand. That was pretty cool. But all of them I wanted to send out to people, but I can't. It's not available.
That makes sense. Well, I get that. Okay, it won't be pretty. I think we can agree with that. It's messy. People are messy. Growing things is messy. Businesses are messy. It will not be pretty. And the last one, I think you kind of said it earlier, and I will read it directly and just mark it explicit. But it says, if we do the right things, we'll make money damn near automatic. And this is something that you said earlier, is I'm not worried about what everybody else is doing. I'm going to do it the right way. We're going to do it right by people. We're going to do what we say we're going to do. And the rest, or in this instance, the money will be fine. Everything's going to be automatic.
It's the byproduct, baby. Like, you got to focus on it. I'm not saying completely ignore financials, but don't make it your Bible. Don't make every decision based off it. Dollars aren't A to B sometimes when it comes to costs and expenses. If you focus on the right things and do the right things and live to a lot of these principles, profitability will be the byproduct.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So Air, the movie, or at least in the story, who's your favorite character in there? I mean, you can't pick Michael Jordan, but you got to pick like a
Matt
Nike
Damon
person.
By a landslide.
The Sonny Vaccaro character.
He's the one that made it happen.
Yeah.
He got everybody believing. He read the room in that interview on actual D-Day and shut his boss up and killed the presentation and audible live. Like, yeah.
His character is super interesting. The Sonny Vaccaro character over time and the story of Sonny is very interesting. You should. I'll link to the direct point in the podcast where it talks about the reality that as they see it as juxtaposed to the movie itself. But I'll tell you, just for listeners, my favorite character, after having watched the movie and then listening to the podcast and then sort of knowing more about the Nike story, is actually the guy named Rob Strasser, who is the Jason Bateman character. And I'll just leave that there because there's some interesting stuff about Strasser, who he was, how he acted at Nike, all that sort of stuff that you have to click in the link below and go listen to the recap on Acquired to figure that out. And then you'll listen to it and be like, oh, I know why that was Stewie's favorite guy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Quarter zips. Always boils down to quarter zips.
No, I think this guy actually was breaking Nike culture of being lax and was wearing a suit every day. Like that was, and wasn't that Bateman's character too? He's always kind of suited up while everybody else had on tennis shoes and stuff.
I don't remember.
Yeah. So anyway, all right, that's sort of top of mind idea for this week, which was to work through this Nike principle sheet that, like I started out earlier saying, kind of caught some fire on the back or on the heels of the Air movie coming out. Good stuff in there. Ideas to think about. A couple of sort of over the top principles is some of them are good, some of them are bad, and some of them transcend time because this is a really old document. But here we have Strasser saying things that we've been talking about and having guests on, and assessing and addressing and chewing on for years. And so some of them are bad, some of them are good, but some of them transcend time. And so that is all the stuff for this week on the Nike things. Anything else going on in your world we need to know about?
No, but I mean, just elaborating on that, these are more than words. That like they transcend time through action, right? Like they're proven results. Like most of the things, if not all the things we talk about, are firsthand, man. Like
right.
Whether it's a good thing or a bad thing. Like, hey, beware of this because it's going to take you down a bad path. If you do this, it's going to help your life, you know. And things that transcend time for a reason.
Right. Right.
So apply which ones resonate with you. You know, don't just listen and then move on to the next thing. Figure out the one or two things you can do to tweak the dial in your life.
That's a great takeaway. I'm going to steal that and put it at the very beginning.
There you go.
Yeah. All right. We will see you guys next week. And until then, y'all stay out there and keep moving mountains.